So let's get started. We've got, safety, and I'm going to breeze through this because this is something you guys can easily go back and see. And it is pretty lengthy, but it is important. So there are, four things you really need to concern yourself with: fire, electrical, fumes, eyes, FIFI. All right, that's the acronym for that. So a couple different ways there that the laser can really hurt you, and so you want to respect it at all times, and that's really the most important thing. A lot of laser-related accidents, they're all due to negligence. So it's you guys that you just need to maintain that respect. And rule number one is never leave your laser unattended. That is the number one rule. Believe it or not, it's the majority of fires happen to intermediate and advanced users. They're getting comfortable. If you're new, you're probably not going to walk away while it's running, but give it a few months and you'll get tempted to go do something else. If you've got to go to the bathroom while your laser's running, pause it and then go to the bathroom, come back, press unpause. But that is always the number one factor when I see somebody has caused significant damage to their laser, is they weren't watching it. Rule number two, keep a fire extinguisher nearby, preferably a CO2 or halotron. Those are less detrimental to electronics. They are also a little more expensive. And know how to use it. That's kind of important. Don't wait till there's a fire to start reading the instructions on it. I tell you from experience, that's not what you want to be doing. Rule number three, always ensure your air pump is operational and you've got enough air flowing. So a fire within your work area is not normal. So the air pump in the machine is supposed to be doing a few things, and one of them, it's supposed to blow out that flame. So if you're engraving or you're cutting and you see a little flame trailing above or below your work piece, press stop. It shouldn't be doing that. It is normal to see some combustion. If you're doing acrylic, it ignites easily and you'll see a little fireball, pop up. That's totally normal as long as it goes back out again. But if that flame stays on and it starts following, your laser head around, that's not good. And that probably means that your air is not flowing. And of course, we've got the emergency stop button. That is definitely one that I see a lot of people struggle with, but is the fastest way to extinguish a quick flare up. So if you do see something like that and you panic, you press the e-stop and it's basically going to cut power to the entire machine. There are a few things you could do prior to that, but just know it's super simple. You push it in. If you want to turn the machine back on, you turn it clockwise and the button pops out. That's how the e-stop works. If you ever go to turn your machine on and it's not turning on, check the e-stop, because that's usually a phone call that you'll make and we'll be like, hey, is your e-stop button pushed in? It usually is. Number five, hey, this is a cool one. I don't ever recall doing this myself personally, but I read about it and I thought it was neat. You can get a bin and fill it with sand, kind of like a giant ashtray, and keep a pair of oven mitts. So if your material does catch on fire and it's a tiny fire, maybe instead of just grabbing the fire extinguisher or trying to pat it out with something, you pull the sheet of material out and you dip it in there and you put it out like you're putting out a cigar or something. Here's the big thing though, keep your work area clean. I will say most fires isn't the material itself, it's the stuff underneath it. So it's usually the remnants of chemicals and soot, just, the long-term use. So routine cleaning of the work area is pretty mandatory. Think about it as your oven or your grill. When that stuff gets all caked up in there, it usually can catch fire. And I've seen it happen a lot in like a barbecue grill, for example. That's the way I know it, where if you leave it dirty for a long time, it'll catch fire. And the last fire safety here is, smoke detectors. For sure, make sure you have batteries in them and you've got one near the machine, and that you have a way to get out. No machine's worth your life. So if fire's out of control, you need to know how to evacuate and you need to dial 911, let someone else come and try to extinguish it. I'm not trying to scare anyone, but I haven't had this happen to anyone yet. So don't be the first. There's some electrical things. You want to definitely make sure that the circuit you're plugging into in your house is properly wired and that it's grounded. I have seen a couple people install lasers in basements, or they live in an old house, or they, they got a shed in the yard. So, make sure that that outlet is properly wired and grounded. And we do recommend a 20 amp circuit. That's pretty standard. You should have one in your house. If you don't, you can have an electrician upgrade it for you. If you have a lot of stuff like an air compressor, you're adding other things, you got a refrigerator in the room that's plugged in, you might need a 30 amp, but just make sure that if you got an electrician out there, they're not just changing the breaker for you, they're actually changing the wiring. That's the important thing. The wiring in the wall should be thicker, the more stuff you're plugging into that circuit. So again, not a big deal. If you're overloading the circuit breaker trips. That's what it's there for. So you're not gonna do anything dangerous by trying, but you definitely want to make sure you don't have other appliances hooked up to that circuit, because when you're cutting at 100% power, it might just trip the whole thing and all the power will go down. I do recommend the surge protector, just like you buy one at Best Buy when they sell you that nice TV. Hey, this is the same deal. Make sure that at least you unplug it during a storm. And don't use an extension cord. I've seen some people doing that. I'm not saying that it's gonna instantly result in a fire, but they do get really, really hot. This isn't designed to run on that, and it's probably not suitable wiring inside to handle all of the amperage that's going through here. Unplug the laser before opening any of the side panels or performing any maintenance. This is really important. So, if we're troubleshooting with you, or you want to get inside to do something, make sure you just pull the plug out from behind the machine. And wait, there are power supplies inside there. They have capacitors in them which store energy. So it does take a little time for them to discharge. I've been shocked a number of times just because, I'm poking around and there's still a little bit in there. It's not the end of the world, but it's definitely not not pleasant. So please make sure that you take that into consideration anytime you open any of the side panels. And let's see, never operate the laser with an exposed laser tube or with the extension off of your machine if you have a tube extension. This is the most dangerous part of the machine. It is the laser tube. We're running a lot of high voltage there. So make sure that, that compartment's always locked. If you're gonna swap out your laser tube, which eventually will need to happen, unplug it. I say leave it for an hour. Unplug it for an hour before you even go messing around in there. It is a lot of voltage, and it's not just going to sting you. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that will stop your heart, kind of thing. So you got to remember, we're creating lightning inside of this machine, so that's a ton of energy in there. It's 100% safe if you do the right things. It's just like any other appliance you own. You've just got to know where your limits are. And so just respect that laser tube at all times and make sure that it's always enclosed. And always ensure that your work area is free from water, condensation especially. So if you are in a humid place like we are in Florida and you're running the laser in a room that's not temperature controlled, you could see that condensation will start building up on the water lines. And so that could definitely be a cause for concern. You don't want the laser trying to arc to that water. So keep an eye on your dew point if you are, in a non-climate controlled room and it is humid. And there should never be any water on the floor either. That could mean your chiller's leaking or, something else. And here's a good one. Don't force the key in either direction. This is something that I've seen happen a few times where, the key is being turned in the wrong way. It really is awkward because it turns counterclockwise to turn it on. So it's the opposite of what you do when you get in your car. They do things different in other parts of the world, right? So it's a quarter turn to the left, and that should click your machine on. You should hear a loud clunk sound when you do it. And when you turn it off, it's a quarter turn to the right. And I recommend taking the key out and pushing the e-stop button in when you're not using the machine, especially if you got kids. just make it, extra layers so that they can't just turn around and start playing with your laser. And then we've got a couple of concerns with fumes. Of course, your vaporizing material. And here's the thing to remember is if you can smell it, you're breathing it in. And that's a big, concern. Yeah, you don't want to be, exposed to this stuff on a constant basis. So you shouldn't be smelling anything. And they do sell VOC detectors. VOCs refers to volatile organic compounds. This is the stuff that can't be trapped with a HEPA filter. So it's the really bad stuff, and it's what creates odors. So there are detectors out there you can get on Amazon that can tell you if the air is clean in your room. We've got one in the office. I got to tell you, it does scare you because you'll realize that air is not clean anywhere. Especially, we have one guy in our office who's a smoker, and that VOC detector goes off anytime he walks near it. So yeah, it's picking up formaldehyde or whatever chemicals are coming off of him. But it's one of these things where, if you don't have one, that's fine. Just if you start feeling a headache or dizzy, or your eyes are irritated, you got to stop. I mean, this is really important stuff. You don't want to be breathing this stuff in. And you want to make sure that your exhaust system is set up to where it's the most efficient it can be. So keeping the exhaust duct length as short as possible is really helpful, and you want to reduce the number of bends. So you want to keep that to a minimum, and that's going to promote the maximum airflow. So the shorter the run, the less bends, the better it's going to operate. If you're using an inline fan, I do recommend you remove the internal blower of the machine. A lot of people will use an inline fan for various reasons. And I'm a fan of it, especially if you're installing in a small environment. So if you're putting this in a spare bedroom or in a closet, it becomes a lot harder to push the air out, only because, or at least to do it without any leaks, because when you're blowing air out, it just creates pressure in your lines, positive pressure, and using an inline fan, it does the opposite. It sucks the air out. So it makes for a much cleaner setup. So, just something to keep in mind if you're going to upgrade that, but you definitely want to make sure that your exhaust system is working right. And if you need help with it, you can call in and, send us pictures of your setup, and one of our techs can help you and give you some pointers on how to improve it. And make sure your fumes are being vented upwards, away from, your neighbors and other living spaces. If you just lay the hose outside on the ground, it's just going to fill up your whole backyard, or, and seep over to your neighbor's house. And that's not cool. I mean, this stuff is pretty bad. So, if you got neighbors close by, or a garden or pets or whatever, I mean, try to route the exhaust upwards once it leaves, your room, and try to get it high enough up to where it's not lingering around. And you want to make sure there's an adequate source of makeup air. A lot of people miss this, but that fan is really going to be pulling a ton of air out of the room. And so you need to allow air to get back in. So if you're in a basement, or if you're in a really tight space, and you're sucking all the air out, you're creating pressure in that room. And that's going to bog down the fan as well. So you got to give it some air to make up for what it's pushing out. And usually you want to make that across from your laser, not where you're exhausting. All right. So if you're not careful, the smoke you're pushing outside will get sucked right back in the window that you're pushing out of if you don't have makeup air somewhere else. So that's really important that you think about that. And always reference the material safety data sheets of any unknown material. There are some materials you should definitely never laser. PVC is the most popular, but there are others. And really it's the ones that, mostly plastics I find that are most dangerous. There's so many chemicals involved, chlorine and chloride, especially. Those are highly corrosive, and, they could definitely, create, well, if you mix chlorine or chloride with let's say hydrogen with water, you get hydrochloric acid. Not good for your lungs. You don't want to be breathing that in. So just don't laser it. And the ticket here is learn before you burn. So if it's something foreign and you've never done it before, definitely take the time to do some research. And let's see here. Rule number 6 on fumes. Try to keep finished product and your scrap material and your honeycomb tray out of your living spaces, if at all possible. That is super important because they do continue to off gas. So even long after you've finished lasering, that stuff will continue to emit gas from it. So if you're in a small room, especially, take that stuff out when you're not using the laser. That way you can still live in that space. I like using storage bins. You can just get a storage bin and put them in there and put a lid on top, and that'll at least contain it. But maybe outdoors is better, or out in your garage, just somewhere where it's not mixed into your living area. And then we've got eyewear. Definitely safety goggles. If you're handling material as well and it's charred, you don't want to rub that stuff into your eyes. This is a preventative measure. If you ever get something in your eyes, I'm sure you can just run to a sink. But they do sell eye wash stations that are gravity fed, and it's a nice little thing to have in your workshop, just for any kind of tool you're using. So you get stuff in your eyes, you don't want to rub your eyes. You want to rinse them out. And the safety glasses, you always want to wear those. The rated safety glasses for CO2 laser is 10,600 nanometers. It's what we sent you with the machine. And you should have it on even if you're looking through the glass lid, and I'll explain that. So, the laser is infrared light. It's invisible, and it doesn't take a lot of it to really, cause eye damage. And the danger with it is you can't see it. And if you can't see it, your blinking reflex isn't triggered. Your blinking reflex only works for visible light. So this is invisible light, which means your eyes won't know to shield themselves. So wear the glasses if you're staring at the laser. If you're just in the room and not looking at it, you're fine. But if you want to see it, even with the lid closed, put them on and make sure anyone else that wants to look at the laser working is wearing a pair as well. And that gets us through safety. I know it was a lot, but I think there's really some important notes in there that you guys will definitely want to make sure that you adhere to. So quick question here. Nikki asked if we should open a window across from the laser, and the answer is yes. Across from it is ideal. If you don't want to make it on the same wall, we're talking again about makeup air and making sure you got a nice flow going through there. So yeah, good question. And yeah, guys, feel free to pop those questions in there, and I will try to answer them when we get to the end of each section. That's probably a good idea. All right, so hey, here's the next section. It's not that scary, and this is an important one. I want you guys to understand, just the basics. You don't need to know what all these wires do. That's what we're for. But if you open it up, you might think like, gosh, it looks like a time bomb in there. But this stuff is really they're really basic systems. And I remember when I started to work with a laser, I was super intimidated. But after several years, I kind of figured out like, hey, this is really simple stuff.